Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a while since we've had a Beyond Our Gates meeting. With COVID-19, we had to cancel one back in April. And this is a great opportunity to not just have a lot of our usual Beyond Our Gates members, but to invite some people from the community to come in, because this is a crucial time for our K through 12 schools and for education in Stockton and San Joaquin County. And I couldn't be more pleased that 4 superintendents are taking the time to spend some time with us today to talk about the various issues. My name is Mike Klocke. I'm the Community Relations Director at Pacific, and it's great to be here. Before we get involved in the discussions, I wanted to recognize a couple of people. First of all, Maria Pallavicini, I think, is calling us on the phone. She is in her penultimate day as interim president of University of the Pacific. When she signed up for 1 year of duty on this, I'm not sure she expected exactly what she was going to have to deal with, but she's just done a steadfast job of helping hold us together. Maria, are you on the phone, I think?
I am on the phone. Can you hear me, Mike?
You sound like somebody who's very eager to be provost again.
Well, yes, my heart is with academics, but I was very honored and actually very privileged to be able to serve as the interim president. And yes, it was a hard year with unprecedented events occurring, but we've gotten through it, and we're strong because just like the Stockton community is strong, Pacific's community is very, very strong. So had lots of good support to do that. So thank you.
Well, from the community and certainly from faculty, staff, and students here, just really appreciate all that you've done, and congratulations on helping guide us through this. And Wednesday, back to your old office, which means we have something else noteworthy happening. We're really pleased to have the 26th president of University of the Pacific, Christopher Callahan, and his wife Jean are here with us today. He's the founding dean of the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State. Takes over officially on Wednesday, but he has been fully engaged in helping us deal with the issues that we're facing ever since he was named in the fall. Chris, would you like to say a few words?
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Maria for the fantastic job that she's done, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with her. I think we've been a good duo already, and looking forward to continuing that. And I'm just so delighted to be able to listen and learn about our community. Jean is on the line somewhere, but Jean and I have been in town now for less than 72 hours. So we have, needless to say, a lot to learn. But again, Mike, thanks for having us on. We're looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. I did want to point out one thing. We have just hit 300 people, and that is our limit on this. So it obviously shows the interest in these topics. I did want everyone to know that we are going to be recording this so we can share it with people who might not have been able to sit in today. If you have questions, if you wouldn't mind typing them in the chat function, and I will try to monitor that and get as many questions asked as possible. I want to introduce the 4 people that are taking time to join us today. Between the 4 of them, they have approximately 100 years of education experience in San Joaquin County. Joining us today are James Mousalimas, San Joaquin County Superintendent of Schools; Brian Biedermann, Interim Superintendent of Stockton Unified School District; Kathy Nichols-Washer, Superintendent of Lodi Unified; and Kelly Dextraze of Lincoln Unified. We had the concept of putting this together about 2 weeks ago, and things have really changed in the 2 weeks since then. First of all, a number of school districts have announced their plans for reopening in the fall and how they're going to do it. The other thing that's happened is we've had a bit of a spike in COVID cases. Approximately 40% of the overall COVID cases have happened in the last 2.5 weeks in San Joaquin County, so there's a lot to deal with. I'd kind of like to take you back to March 13th when a lot of this happened. And Jamie Mousalimas from the County Office of Education sent out a memo that day. All the school districts in the county agreed to shut down at that point. And so much has happened since then. People learned how to distance learn. They dealt with all sorts of issues and had really no time before getting into the summer and having to come up with new plans for the fall. So James, I'd kind of like you just as kind of a setting the tone to talk about, you know, what was going on back in the middle of March and kind of how we've transpired to this point, because it seems like it's been an extraordinarily tough grind. But when you look at the calendar, there's only 3.5 months that we've done. So James, would you mind kind of setting the tone for us?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. First, thanks for putting this together. Appreciate it. I see so many faces and names, people I know. I hope not too far in the future that we'll be meeting in person and reconnect that way. I know we're all communicating via Zoom, and thank goodness for this forum. But so Mike, just looking back, it seemed like a year ago, doesn't it? And it was just in early March that we were faced with this pandemic and really didn't know the scope of it at that point. A lot of information, and then how it was affecting schools. I have to say, in early March, I was an absolute staunch advocate for keeping schools open and not closing.
Plugged in, it's like not even.
I
These are brand new.
felt strongly that the children that we serve, so we have about 147,000 public school students in our county. About 2/3 of those children live in some level of poverty. And the children we serve are best served when they are at school. They're fed, they're safe, they're kept warm. They have adults there looking out for their interests. They're getting a hopefully quality education. So closing schools was not taken lightly by any means. But as this pandemic began to unfold and we were getting more information, there was also an outcry from the community and from parents that were very concerned, and from our staff members about staying open. And so we all got together, being we have 14 school districts in the county, County Office of Education and Delta Community College, and got together with the public health officer and made that decision to close schools. To be honest with you, at that time, we thought it was going to be temporary, short term. We closed for a short period of time, under the assumption that maybe at the very latest, end of April, that we would be reopening our schools. And so we were basing that on what we knew at the time. Obviously, that has not come into play. And then we eventually kept our schools closed. When I say schools, I mean the buildings. Instruction continued, but the physical buildings were closed through the end of the 2019-20 school year.
Yeah, we have 3 school districts that are here today and a couple other school districts that I've talked to kind of gauge what's happening with them. But one school district that's represented here today, Lodi Unified, has actually met as a board and taken action. Kathy Nichols-Washer, Superintendent of Lodi Unified, is here. Can you fill us in on the plans for Lodi Unified moving ahead?
Certainly. At the last school board meeting, the Board of Education gave us direction to continue planning, to move forward with our planning for reopening of the school year under a traditional full schedule. So that means all students in classes 5 days a week with health and safety measures in place. And part of their direction was that school would open in this manner under the contingency that those health and safety measures were in place. They also expressed great interest in modifying the school calendar, and we're hopeful in being able to talk about a later school day start for the school year. We start August 3rd, and there was lots of discussion about what that could look like in terms of delaying the start for students. At this point, we understand that the governor is scheduled to sign the budget sometime soon, and it doesn't appear that there will be flexibility with instructional days. So if there is a change to the school calendar, we would need to make up those days at some point in the year in order to get the required number of days. So there was a lot of confusion about that, things that happened at the board meeting and how things were phrased and how things were interpreted. But the board did not change the school calendar for students. School still begins right at this point on August 3rd for students to physically be at school and start classes. If there is the opportunity to have further discussions about the calendar, we will do that. But at this point, we are set for an August 3rd start under the traditional model.
What has been the response from the public and from teachers and staff to 5 days a week? Are they comfortable with it?
It is all over the place. We are hearing
Sorry, we were frozen for a minute. Are you guys back?
Can't hear anything.
Can anybody else hear Kathy, or is she off now?
I can only hear you, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, only you, Mike.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move ahead then to another school district. Stockton Unified, Brian Biedermann took over as interim superintendent in the middle of this pandemic and has had to deal with a lot. Stockton Unified officials actually have been meeting this week, including today, to come up with their plans. And I'm not sure with what you can share with us at this point, Brian, but where are things headed for Stockton Unified?
So we had thank you, Mike. We had a 5-hour meeting today with our labor leaders, a few of our board trustees and upper management, narrowing down our plans that we intend to take to the board on Wednesday, July 1st. We are scheduled to return on August 3rd. A lot of folks in our county, the districts in our county, are returning full-time with a virtual option. That is on the plate for us as well, but with the county numbers being high, we wanted to create a hybrid option for our community to ensure safety. So that's what we are bringing to the board on Wednesday. And just in a nutshell, without getting too specific, it would be a couple of days on live instruction with a few days off with a deep cleaning, probably on Wednesday or Monday, which would include teacher professional development. But we have to be able to be nimble and flexible with the numbers that we currently have. So we are presenting a four-phase option to our board. And like I said, this morning, we had a great conversation with our labor leaders. They all had autonomy and choice in a model. I think we narrowed it down and came to consensus on one that we're going to present to the board on Wednesday.
By the way, happy birthday.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Lincoln Unified Superintendent Kelly Dextraze is with us today. Kelly, can you fill us in on where things are headed at this point for Lincoln Unified? I think you're muted.
Sorry, try that again. We have been engaged with stakeholders up until this point, working with a superintendent's advisory committee, which is representatives from across the district and a variety of job classes, categories, sites, departments, looking at all of the various guidance that's been provided to us, as well as survey results from staff, students, parents, trying to determine what our next steps will be. It's my anticipation that I'll be taking a draft proposal to the board on the 8th of July. We are due to return to school on the 6th of August, and I anticipate that we'll have a plan ready to roll out relatively soon. Again, you know, with a goal in mind to provide a rigorous instructional program for students while making sure that we can do that in a safe environment for students and staff.
Thank you very much. I want to mention two other school districts aren't represented on the panel, but Manteca Unified has also voted to return to school 5 days per week. Somewhat of a, almost kind of mirrors what Lodi Unified is doing. And Tracy Unified put together a panel of 27 members for their advisory committee, and they also are returning 5 days per week are their plans for right now. So, you know, with a number of school districts, including some large ones, looking at returning 5 days per week, I was just curious, Kelly, what you think with the uptick in recent COVID cases, kind of weighing that against your options. Is that something that is impacting your decision?
Absolutely. I think we anticipate that we'll have some options available. And we have a large parent community of families that do not want to send their children back to school. They want them to have a strong, sound educational option, but are very concerned about sending them back to school. And I think the challenge for us of trying to figure out how to provide all the safety measures that are being recommended is something we're looking at very carefully. So I anticipate we'll have some options for families, but it's a very challenging situation, and the guidance changes daily.
James, I wanted to ask you about some of the other school districts, some of the smaller ones, Lammersville, Linden, et cetera, along with the San Joaquin County Office of Education schools. What are the status for some of the smaller school districts with their plans right now?
So Mike, I think each district is going through what we're hearing from Stockton, Lodi, and Lincoln, which is going through a process of determining what the community is interested in and also the staff. And each solution is going to be very unique. So I don't know exactly what those districts have decided or if they have yet. What I can say is at the County Office of Education, you know, we educate the most severely disabled children in the county, the medically fragile children and children with autism on the extreme end of the spectrum. And those children do best with personal interaction. That distance learning for those children is not ideal by any means. And so we're trying to figure out is how do we return those children back to the classroom safely for their safety and staff safety. And we need to figure that out because these children need, especially children on the autism spectrum, it's that personal interaction, especially with very young children in preschool, where makes the difference and helps them make significant progress. And so we're in the midst of that process right now, Mike. I wish I could say that we have all the answers. We do not. We're all dealing with a situation that we have never been in before. This is all new territory. And there's many unknowns. And as you mentioned, COVID cases, the numbers are going up, unfortunately. They're not going in the right direction, which further complicates this. But we do know, and especially all children, especially special needs children, that they need that personal interaction with adults to really make progress. So how do we do that in a safe manner? That's exactly what we are trying to figure out right now.
Safety is obviously one of the key issues that we're looking at, that everyone is looking at. And instead of asking each superintendent for their thoughts on safety, et cetera, I wanted to kind of go through a day and maybe you could kind of touch on how you would how things are going to be dealt with. I'll start with Brian Biedermann and Stockton Unified. You have approximately 50 campuses around the community that you have to deal with. At the start of the day, how is it going to work? How are you going to make sure that students are well when they get to school, make sure that that things are sanitized? How is the day going to start as far as before the kids even get to the classrooms?
Good question, Mike. We're going to follow the county guidelines that Jamie's office has given us and the county public health officials guidelines. All of our teachers will have thermometers. We're putting plexiglass up in our front offices. We are what lunch, recess, and after-school activity looks like. We're still looking into those things. What using multi-purpose spaces look like. We're still ironing those out. Our custodian and facilities crews are going to go through heavy training on what deep cleaning and what they're calling COVID cleaning looks like. And we're still flushing a lot of that out to ensure that we're safe. We surveyed our community and we had about a 70-30 split. 70% of our community wants to come back to school in some sort of fashion, whether it's a hybrid or students just returning as normal, with a 30% that aren't comfortable coming back yet. And what does that look like? Whether that is a continued on distance learning or a independent study where they would show up one day a week and then go home and then come back. But yeah, what the daily reality is going to look like is going to be quite different from what we're normally dealing with. And, you know, our adults, and it's not just student safety, it's adult safety with the PPE equipment that they're going to wear. And, you know, masks for older students, and what having a kindergartner wearing a mask all day, what does that look like if that's, you know, what we have to do according to the county. So there's a lot to be done with a little bit amount of time that we have left, but our reality is definitely going to change come August 3rd.
Just an FYI, I'm dealing with a little side issue when Kathy Nichols-Washer froze up a little bit earlier. Got kicked out of the chat and is trying to get back in, but we're at our 300 cap. So I'm trying to reach her on the phone. So I'm dealing with that kind of on the side. But kind of going on with moving through the day, Kelly and Lincoln Unified, obviously there's going to be a big difference between a kindergarten with 25 kids or fourth or fifth grade with 30 kids or all the way to high schools. But can you take us through what a safe classroom is going to look like in Lincoln Unified? How are things going to be distributed? Just a minute. How are things going to be set up so that there's social distancing, etc.? Knowing that those classrooms are pretty packed as it is, how can you make it work?
So I think we are analyzing every classroom individually. We're looking at square footage. We are looking at what absolutely has to be in a classroom versus what can be removed. We're looking at what additional spaces we may have on a campus that could be instructional spaces. We are looking into all kinds of additional equipment, plexiglass desk shields and floor markers, and purchasing additional equipment so that students who previously shared materials will no longer have to do that. And I think, you know, Brian said it well, every situation is a little bit unique, and we will have to kind of be assessing that as we move forward.
Do you expect masks to be worn by all students?
It seems, based on the governor's most recent requirement for all, that the answer to that is yes. We are purchasing face shields that could be used for some students, and it also looks like the governor's requirement has some exceptions for students who may have a special need or a health condition that would preclude them from wearing masks.
And same for teachers and staff too?
Correct. We've heard from lots of teachers about the concern of having their face covered, particularly for young students and teaching literacy, and hoping that they will have access to face shields rather than a cloth face covering. And we're doing our best to obtain as many of those as possible.
All right, we're going to try this out. Kathy, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Can you guys hear Kathy okay? Okay. We were talking, the topic was safety, and we touched on a couple different things of what a classroom is going to look like, etc. I wanted to ask you about something else in regards to safety on campus. You know, schools are communities. You know, they're gathering spots for PTA events, concerts, athletic events, different community events, etc. Are you going to have, in Lodi Unified, are you going to have to make things more of an essential, people can use it and have to shut down those sort of things? Or do you think there's still room for it?
Unfortunately, at this point, it looks like that most of those types of events and activities would not happen at our school sites. And you know, this is part of the heartbreaking part of this. I mean, there are a lot of challenges and disappointments, but you know, these social aspects, the activities that kids enjoy and can interact with each other, and bringing outside folks in to give them different experiences, those are things that are going to have to be let go for a while. There won't be assemblies. There won't be large gatherings, dances. You know, we won't have those types of events. We're going to have to limit visitors. You know, we have a very involved community and a business community that is very supportive, that will come and be in classes and do career awareness and junior achievement and read to kids and help kids who are struggling. And those things, unfortunately, are going to have to be put on hold for a while.
I'm going to kind of group together a series of questions that people have asked in the chat, and it has to do with safety and whether or not we should even be talking about returning in this sort of environment. And Brian, I wonder what you think about that, because it sounds like your district is looking at some other options, but you know, there are obvious issues with it. What are your thoughts when that argument is made?
Yeah, Mike, we're definitely concerned about safety. We're also concerned, and we came up with a list of guiding principles as we're building our models that would kind of ground us and put guardrails up on where one of those guiding principles is the social emotional learning as a priority for students and adults. Our kids aren't being contacted right now. That adult connection, the COVID slide, summer slide, you name it. We understand that there are safety concerns with COVID, and we're going to try to mitigate those the best that we can. But we also know the deep need of our community to get back to school, get back to those relationships that our kids desperately need, and to address a lot of the social emotional concerns. Prior to COVID, our kids were already dealing with quite a bit of drama in Stockton. You magnify that with COVID. We need to make contact with our kids in the safest way possible. And there's a lot of our kids that I know in the chat, there's a lot of comments about special ed and specific subgroup populations that are really going because the equity is really being magnified with COVID. Kids that had special needs or just were behind grade level, whatever you want to call it, before COVID, it's been magnified now, and the desperate need to get to those kids now to address the equity and access for those kids with the idea of keeping everybody safe. I think that's why the hybrid model is so very important for us. There's no one model that's going to address all needs, but the hybrid model gives us flexibility to allow us to come back as safe as possible. And those students that still don't feel safe can stay home and get the high quality education that they would have hopefully received live on campus.
Kathy, I wonder about safety for high school students. With the primary grades, et cetera, you talk about, you know, social distancing, having them separate, but for a high school student that might be going to 3 or 4 or 6 different classrooms in a day, are there any accommodations being made for them?
We are looking at anything that's possible, you know, cleaning quickly in between, you know, lots of things that have been discussed, having disinfectants right there in the classroom, not waiting for somebody else to come and do it at the end of the day. We have one school that's on a block schedule, so that will help a little bit with that. They're not moving around as much, but the other schools, the other high schools,
we come back, full time as we're talking about now, they would be going to all their classes in one day. So that is a concern that a lot of folks have expressed.
One of the questions that was asked, and anyone can answer this, was the safety of teachers. There was concern about being surrounded by students that, with the possibility, and then what would happen if a teacher does get COVID? Right now the typical quarantine time is 14 days. Some people don't even have 14 days of sick time. Are there accommodations being made for those sort of things?
This is Kathy. There is a temporary provision in place that gives employees 10 extra sick leave days. So that is available. And then I think that each district is probably different in terms of what their contract language says for their employee groups in terms of sick leave. So those are things we're probably all discussing.
Mike, also, I think there was a question I saw about PPE. So the state is supplying schools and districts with about 2 months supply of masks, hand sanitizer, and thermometers. Those are going to be in our county delivered to us at the County Office of Education. We have not received that equipment yet, but when we do, then we will distribute that to the districts and schools in the county. It'll be some number of masks for staff and also students, those handheld thermometers to check temperatures on site, and also hand sanitizer. So they're telling us enough for about 2 months, the first 2 months, and then after that, it'll be up to each of us, schools and districts, to purchase our own.
Okay. Had a question asked. I have an elementary school student who was enrolled in after school last year. How is that going to work for students in the new year? And I'm not sure which school district this is from, but how are after school programs being handled for this?
I can speak for Stockton Unified, Mike. We are still going to hold our after-school programming. It's a lot easier to manage because typically that's a lot smaller. We'll use multi-purpose spaces, but we are definitely going to pursue after-school programming with all the safety guidelines and protocols that we talked about prior.
Lincoln is looking to do something very similar and trying to maintain our students in cohort groups. So they have a staff person with a small number of students, and they would, rather than mixing with the whole large after-school program, stay in a cohort group during their after-school program. But just like Brian says, we're not looking to reduce those services. We think families are really going to need those services moving forward.
A question that somebody asked that I guess could have been addressed to me was, how do we expect to feel safe sending our children back to school when we don't feel comfortable enough having this meeting in person? And it's a very good point. We closed down meetings of size some time ago. That being said, I couldn't be more pleased that 300 people are on this, and I wish I had increased the level a little bit for it too. I want to touch on budgets a little bit. It obviously costs money to deal with a pandemic, and whether it's shields or whatever, did what the governor proposed help enough, or are districts still hurting? Kelly?
Oh, sorry. I think there's still a little bit of lack of clarity in some of the trailer bill language in terms of what we're going to be allowed to do. I think the significant deferrals, while they make things maybe appear easier in the short term, they do not solve problems for us long term. So I think it's a little bit of relief, but I don't think it's significant. And I think you said it, all of the things we're talking about needing to implement to keep people safe are not compatible with reductions to our budgets. So I think we're all struggling with how best to resolve that conflict.
Was the governor's plan to deal with some things now, but maybe kick some other expenses down the road. Is that problematic, or do you think it's the best approach at this point?
That's a very good
The
question.
entirely problematic. It wouldn't be. I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
No, go ahead, Kathy.
It would be problematic no matter what, which approach was used. But, you know, with deferrals, we're talking about cash and having to use cash differently because we're not going to get the revenue at the time that we would normally get it. That's going to have a huge impact on districts. And it does not solve the problem. And at some point, that needs to be solved. So districts are going to have to eventually make cuts to address the real issues. You can't do a temporary fix for very long. It's going to catch up to us, and it's going to catch up hard, and it's going to be very devastating, especially because we're expending a lot of funds, one-time funds, other funds, to take care of these health and safety measures that we need to have in place. When we get down to after this deferral environment is over, it's going to be time for some significant cuts.
We've seen talk at a couple of districts in the county of heavy layoffs of classified staff. Is that something where that group of people has become more vulnerable because of this? Brian?
I don't know about vulnerable. I know that they're essential. Stockton Unified has been able this coming year to avoid layoffs moving into 21-22. Like both superintendents before me stated, long term, if we don't figure out we're going to have layoffs in 21-22, and that would affect all unions potentially, not just classified. But part of that governor's recent release is that we are not able to lay off transportation, food services, and custodial, knowing full well that we're going to need them like we've never needed them before if we expect to open and open safely. But yeah.
I wanted to change approaches on one other question that's maybe a little bit more uplifting. Sometimes when you're dealing with crises or emergency situations, the creativity in people, you know, a teacher that comes up with a great idea of something to do, et cetera, can be real helpful. Brian, back to you. Your previous job before you moved into interim, you actually had innovation in the title of your job. What ways do you think education can innovate to not only help get through this, but maybe create something lasting?
Well, typically innovation costs a lot of money, Mike. But we had healthy discussions this morning as talking about like synchronous learning, that if I'm a teacher and I have 10 of my students live and 20 stayed home, and filming it synchronously as the synchronous learning, that it would be streamed to their room, streamed to the home in real time. The same instruction. Now we have to get through our labor to make sure that that's okay. But I mean, the virtual options that a lot of colleges are going to, like Delta, and streaming, dual enrollment classes in, and then that whole concept, we're talking about money and budgets, that economy of scale concept. For example, if Edison High School has a class that has 10 kids in it, why can't Chavez, Franklin, and Stagg virtually log into that class and also take it? It doesn't have to be isolated to just one campus. So thinking outside of the box, and how do we maximize our budget and maximize our creativity in a sense, and give our kids a lot of access that they typically haven't had before. So we're trying to think outside of the box with that. And what our distance learning is going to be at the beginning of the year potentially is not what it was at the end of the year. It has to be more robust. It has to be more in line with the rigorous instruction that they would get live. And so how do we address that need if that's how we open up, because our county numbers suggest that we do that. But yeah, innovation takes a lot of creativity, Mike, and there's a lot of conversations that we're having with our people right now. And then what is realistic with the little bit of time that we have left to open up with. But we're definitely trying to utilize what we can virtually as far as our creativity and innovation goes.
Kathy, how about LODA Unified? What are some possible innovation things that are happening in your district?
Well, last quarter, of course, it wasn't the distance learning model that would be ideal because it was a crisis mode and teachers were thrown into it with very little time to even think about it. And as a result, we had a lot of shining stars come through that. The teachers were doing incredible things with technology. The ones that have gone viral were just a few of the examples, but that was widespread. The types of lessons that our teachers were creating for the students and the way that they were reaching out and trying to get to them was just outstanding and just such a tremendous effort that some of those things would be great even if we weren't in distance learning mode. I mean, those types of experiences for children using technology would be great in an in-person classroom as well. So I know that they will take that with them regardless of how things end up when school starts or even next year to do those innovative things. They've just been phenomenal.
I have a bunch of other questions that I had kind of scripted, and I'm going to kind of toss those aside because there are so many good questions that are being asked. So I'm going to go straight to the questions to make sure that we can get as many of these answered as possible. Give me just a second to get them queued up. Question asked is, bars and restaurants, when a patron comes in and is tested positive for COVID, the business is shut down for 14 days. How can we make sure that that requirement won't be placed on schools? Jamie, do you have any thoughts on that?
So we're working now with our Department of Public Health to determine exactly what will be the protocol, Mike. I think that that question is absolutely a valid one, is because how will that play out? Will it just be a classroom if we get a positive case? If it's an elementary school and it's contained to a classroom, would it only be the classroom that would be closed for a period of time, or would it be the entire school, probably depending on exposure? So that at a high school, it's more complicated because if you have a student that tests positive that goes from class to class and then intermixes with other students and staff, that becomes a much more complicated issue. So we don't have an answer to that right now, but it's an absolute valid point and one that we have to figure out what are the exact protocols, and we'll work with public health to determine that.
Question was asked, I'm an education technology consultant that assists schools and districts in supporting teachers to design and implement inclusive, integrated, and holistic face-to-face, hybrid, and other instruction models. Do districts have enough money to try to get this sort of creativity and empower teachers in different ways of learning that they may need? Brian, any thoughts on that?
We don't have an unlimited budget, Mike, but we do have monies from the, GEARS, that is specifically set up for COVID loss that we have to spend by December. So we are looking at some of that money to buy the technology that we potentially need. It's very restrictive, though. It can't just be any, we have to really take a hard look at what that is. And is it sustainable past December? I don't want to buy anything that's a short-term fix and then we can no longer use it. But to answer your question, yes, we do, but it's restrictive on what we can spend it on.
A couple people have asked questions about students with health issues, whether it's asthma or other health issues that they have to deal with, and what can be done for them and with them. What sort of approaches, Kelly, do you have that you might be able to help those children?
We'll be engaging our health services department to work with families on health plans as necessary for our students, but I would anticipate that those would be students who might choose to continue in a distance learning option for a period of time to limit their exposure to other students. But those are all things that are going to have to be addressed kind of on an individual basis based on what the individual needs of the student are and the individual circumstances available to them.
Kathy, for students that are on lunch programs, etc., a couple of people ask questions about how are you going to maintain safety and of lunches. Are you changing anything around in dealing with that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question. Students who are on what?
On free and reduced lunch or lunch programs, are you changing anything to ensure safety in regards to food services?
Oh, okay. Yes, our food service department has been working on plans for quite a while now on different types of packaging and food that would be served. You know, we used to have the buffet style with, you know, salads and lots of options. Those types of things have to be put on hold. So it'll be more of like a grab and go kind of a concept. Things that kids can maybe take outside to find more space to sit. Things that are easily transported, easy to eat. No more, you know, kind of that share table kind of concept. So there will be some modifications in terms of the type of food, still following all the requirements that need to be followed, and ways to spread kids out a little bit in outside areas as much as possible. With
some students wanting to, or families wanting to do distance learning, are the schools equipped with Chromebooks, et cetera, in order to deal with it? You know, I read an interesting story the other day about a family back east that had 2 parents who were working from home and 4 kids who had to be home. So there were 6 people in the family battling over internet. Brian, the digital divide issue is a long-standing one, but are there ways that you can make sure that it's not exacerbated when this is going on?
Yeah, we're assessing that right now, Mike. I think we issued almost 30,000 Chromebooks or something like that. We don't know what's coming back to us on day one, whether they're going to be in good condition, broken, or they need to be re-imaged. We did order quite a few more. We have always been more concerned about our connectivity and the hotspots for the students that may not have connectivity at home. We ordered as many hotspots as we could. Everybody in California and across the nation was ordering at the very same time, so we did not get a one-to-one hotspot. We're not at one-to-one yet, but the digital divide is still there. And when day one happens, we'll be able to assess what I take that back. It won't be day one. We'll know that weeks before August 3rd what our actual assessment of our reality is. I don't believe it'll be one-to-one, to be honest with you, Mike. We're going to have some work to do to ensure that the students that are on distance learning have the Chromebooks prior to the kids that are live.
Again, a question that's been asked several times: what happens to classified staff, paraprofessionals, et cetera, if we go strictly distance learning? Can't really ask that question of a couple that are not going distance learning, but a couple others are still gauging whether to do that. Brian, you mentioned a potential distance learning segment of what you're looking to do. What would be an answer to this question?
Well, and again, we're going to go with what the county guidelines suggest, that if we're in phase 1 or 2, we'll obviously shut down. But I know that when we shut down last year, our custodial crews, everybody got paid. We did not dock them or anything like that. We had MOUs with all our bargaining units, and we made sure that we took care of them. If that occurs again and we are in another shutdown of some sort, I imagine that's what we would continue to do to ensure that our employees are taken care of when our students do come back. But right now, we're not projecting that we're opening fully distant learning unless the governor decides or the county decides to put us into a different phase.
Question, Kelly, that was asked of Lincoln Unified. I hope that Lincoln Unified expands after-school options to make sure that students have the opportunity to safely interact with peers and adults. Is expansion of after-school programs an option?
I don't anticipate that we'll be able to expand programming, but I don't anticipate that we'll be cutting what we've had so far either. I don't think we'll have the funds to expand.
Okay. Question was asked about transportation. I'll ask that, Brian. You have quite a bit of transportation that you deal with. Are you doing the diagonal seating, or what's the approach for transportation in Stockton Unified?
Yeah, for the students that do have transportation from our transportation department, I think if I heard correctly this morning, a bus that could take or had a capacity of 60 might be down to 15 to have safe social distance. So that's going to require more stress and trips with our transportation department. The majority of our kids do take RTD to get to and from school, and we are still trying to connect with RTD to see what that social distance looks like for RTD. But I imagine it's going to be much of the same. So students getting to school on time could be problematic until we get the logistics of what that looks like.
Question was asked. Curious what a question was asked about children that have breathing issues, whether it's asthma or whatever, and how they can work with that. I imagine, obviously, if there are asthma issues, that those would be considered. Kathy, but has that been something that you've discussed at all for students with medical issues?
We have and continue to discuss those kinds of details. We are offering an all-distance learning option for parents who believe that their children would be better served in that manner. They have health conditions that would probably be a good option. We also have our independent study that has been in place for a long time. That's an option as well for parents. In terms of on the school campus, if masks are required, as was pointed out before, there are exceptions. So we would be able to utilize the exceptions when appropriate for students who have conditions that a mask would be harmful to them or cause them issues. So we would make sure that we follow whatever guidelines are in place at the time.
Question was asked, it's great that students would have the option to stay at home, but what about teachers that feel uncomfortable with working in that environment? Kelly, is that an issue that you look at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had lots of conversation with our teaching staff about these issues, and if we are able to offer independent study or a distance learning type of model, we would seek to match teachers who had that as a preference with our students, but we're not to the point of making those types of decisions yet. But again, I've said this a lot today, I guess, but we have to address all of those things on an individual case-by-case basis.
Let's see. There've been a couple of questions about different distance learning models and schedules. Well, if we reach a point where we have to regress to not being full-time at school, there are a lot of, there's the morning versus afternoon, or there's 4 on and 1 off day. For each of the superintendents, if it reaches a point where we have to deal with that, are there hybrid models that you prefer over other ones?
I can answer that, Mike. We went through 8 models this morning, everything from an AM, PM shift to alternating weeks. We landed on a model that we're going to present to our board that was half the campus 2 days with a day of deep cleaning, and the other half of campus 2 days. So it's it's 2 days on, 3 days off. And what that day, it might be a Wednesday. We picked Wednesday initially, but then we realized that there's a lot of holidays on Monday. So maybe we moved the day to Monday, and then it would be a Tuesday, Wednesday, half the campus, Thursday, Friday, half the campus. We need to build that out just in the event that how we like to come back doesn't work and it's not safe. So we're building out, like I said earlier, a 4-phase model depending on what makes the most sense for the safety of our community. And again, this is we're going to the board on Wednesday, and I imagine we're going to get some input there as well.
There are currently 3,000 COVID cases in San Joaquin County, and the number rises every day. Why are districts not working on full distance learning plans this fall? Even having a hybrid schedule puts students, teachers, and staff at risk. I saw it described in a tweet the other day as, are we pitting science against daycare? Is the reason that we're going to 5 days back, even with the problems that are happening, because of issues that people have with which are very legitimate issues of daycare needs or jobs lost, etc. But Jamie, what are your thoughts when you hear that argument made?
So Mike, sorry, I got knocked off, and then I came over here to Troy's office, so I just got back on. So I think the question was, so can you repeat that actually? I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, let me get back to it. Basically, it was, to shorten it up, it was the idea of the issues that are caused by daycare needs, and yet districts looking at going back five days per week, even though the COVID cases are rising. The question was posed, is this becoming daycare versus science as far as why things are opening?
So Mike, everything we're following is from the California Department of Public Health and then from our county Office of Public Health. So any of these implementations are based on those guidelines from our state and county health officers. And as far as being able to how narrow or broadly we can go back and open schools in August. Now, this is this is an ongoing and moving situation, right? And we know the numbers are increasing in our county. So there's no telling what the public health order in the state or the county will look like 2 to 3 months from now. But based on the current guidelines, it is based on the public health guidelines that districts are making these decisions. The guidelines are very broad and they're fairly flexible as to what districts can do or not do.
Question was asked about athletics. Are they going to happen or are they not going to happen? Brian?
Right now we are conditioning. Our athletic directors and coaches are using the same county guidelines that we received from our county and the CIF. There is talk that our fall sports may be moved to the winter, but right now we're proceeding as they would potentially be in the fall, maybe without fans. But we have been conditioning for the past 2 weeks per the guidelines. And again, all our coaches were trained. They all have thermometers out there. They are social distancing appropriately. We have deployed nurses to watch the practice to ensure that they're doing it right and to give the coaches feedback. But they've been, So we're currently conditioning with the hope of playing in the fall, but that could look differently.
I'll keep you on, Brian. Another Stockton Unified question. If Stockton Unified is thinking about teachers engaging in professional development on the off day, how are they going to monitor students online that day?
It would be a combination. The PD would not be all day. It would be like a half day with monitoring their roster the rest of the day. Our teachers were given a lot of professional development from our amazing curriculum department while we're shut down and in the summer, and we're going to continue that when we ramp up in July. We realized that just giving technology to our students isn't enough. It's the teachers that are responsible for facilitating that technology that really have to be trained. And I think, like Kathy said earlier, teachers have really stepped up and been innovative, and it's like flashes of brilliance here and there. It's just replicating that and proliferating that to everybody. So all teachers have the tech access and tech savvy to reach all their students.
Okay. What about music, art, drama, the arts? Any other superintendents, if you want to touch on that?
I think the music community is seeking to provide guidance about what is safe. There's a lot of research around choir and band right now. We've reached out to our county public health for some more particular guidance, seeking for this group of people to be innovative in their approach to these services. And again, not wanting to limit opportunities that are good for kids, but also wanting to make sure that everyone's safe. I think we are going to have to really pay attention to the cohort issues and how many students are coming together and for what purpose. And those will be things that we'll be addressing with regard to those subjects, I think probably a lot in the next coming weeks.
Question was asked in several different ways. If a teacher were to get COVID or a student to get it, would you have to shut down an entire classroom, or what sort of approach? I assume working with the county, there are different options or different levels rather of that, but any thoughts for any of the superintendents on any discussions you've had with county about how to deal with that if a teacher or student tests positive?
And Mike, I think I may have touched on it earlier, and best I can say is it depends. There's no, I cannot give a, an exact answer to that. It'll really depend on the situation. It will be working in tandem with county public health to make those decisions. We are trying to put together a flow chart that at least is can somewhat be followed at least in most cases. But if there is a positive case at a school, then county public health need to be notified and then go through a protocol and a process to determine whether or not a classroom would be closed, or does it go beyond that?
Let's see. The technological tools don't use themselves, and a lot of money can go into purchasing equipment and software. But is there the training that is needed to be basically equipment purchased to help teachers, but are they getting trained on it, I guess is the question they're asking. Kathy, any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's always room for more, but yes, we have a team of coaches, instructional coaches and technology coaches, and actually that's the area where our teachers said that went really well at the end of last year, that our instructional coaches and tech coaches really stepped up and provided tremendous support and giving them assistance creating videos for trainings. We do have a couple days of professional development before the start of school set up at the moment that is focused on distance learning, put on by our own teachers on how to be innovative and creative with distance learning using technology. So yes, we have done a lot, but could there be more? Absolutely, there could always be more.
This is something that's also being dealt with right now at the college level, but the problems that something like this cause in regards to stress or mental health, etc. Several of the school districts in the county have been sending out suicide awareness type of information. How are things being handled with your counseling staff? What is your counseling staff like in terms of numbers? Are you able to increase resources to help deal with this for students?
Mike, I think we hired 33 mental health clinicians last year before this occurred. Our counseling numbers are significantly higher than they've been in the past. We have a hotline for our students for mental health and suicide prevention. Everybody that was issued a Chromebook, we also monitor any like suicidal thought searches on the internet. We get identified there as well. So we're doing as much as we can in a community that has a lot of trauma, but you can't replace the live connection with people with virtual and that day-to-day contact. When we were checking in on distance learning, we were trying to do pulse checks with our students, and a lot of them did not check in, and we were trying to deploy to see, just checking on their house or stuff like that. But that was very difficult as well because we were still in phase 1. But to answer your question, yeah, we're trying to deploy as much as we can, and I think that we have a great team in our student services department that does that. And again, we're checking in as much as we can with our students that are exhibiting trauma or that are notifying our hotline that they need support.
Jamie, I'm gonna have you answer this question, maybe with some statewide perspective. Somebody asked, how safe are our elementary teacher jobs for upcoming years? Are we forecasting a huge layoff like in 2008?
So Mike, this year they're safe. There will be no teacher layoffs this year per the governors and the legislature's budget. That they have mandated there will be no teacher layoffs for the 2021 school year. As Brian mentioned earlier, no layoffs of classified staff in those 3 categories that he mentioned, and highly encouraging or recommending that there are no classified layoffs beyond that. So 2021, I think, is relatively safe. 21, 22 is problematic because I think it was mentioned before, this budget is that we're looking at for next year is more positive than what the governors may revise was a 10% cut. So that was eliminated so that we're getting basically the same funding as last year with some exceptions, but basically the same. But that doesn't mean that there's not an economic problem in the state, that there's not a budget problem. And so it's kind of kicking the problem down the road, and that will likely manifest itself in the 21-22 school year. So to answer the question, this year should not be an issue. The following year could very well be an issue, but I don't know for sure. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't look that far ahead, but certainly seems that way when we hear all of the economic projections for California and the country.
A couple of questions were posed about substitute teachers. It always can be kind of a crapshoot in trying to get enough subs to deal with things, but with the COVID and the parachuting into a classroom for a day, there's some concern of, will there be enough substitute teachers to deal with the needs when teachers are sick or when there's professional development, etc. Kelly, any thoughts on how you're going to approach that?
Yeah, we're in the process of reaching out to all of our existing subs at this time to kind of assess their willingness to work in this environment as well as their availability, so that we can make a plan moving forward. It's certainly an area of concern, and I anticipate will be a challenge for many of us.
Brian, how's your situation with subs?
Yeah, we're also going to reach out to our subs. We paid our subs at the end of the year, even though we were off. That's not going to happen at the beginning of the year. We do have a good cohort of subs that we're also going to not just make contact, we're also going to train them on the same virtual training that our teachers are getting. So if they do have to fill in, they are able to fill in and transition smoothly and not just babysit. So we are going to give our subs training along with our teachers so they can fill in appropriately.
Brian, I've had a couple of questions from people about the 6-foot rule, and they feel that it's not going to be used in Stockton Unified.
It's not going to be used?
The question is, please address the 6-foot distance rule in Stockton Unified and how they're doing it.
Sure. So our facilities department is doing a space audit of all of our classrooms to see what 6 feet looks like and how many students that can accommodate. If, like I said, if our survey data is accurate and 70% come to school and 30 don't, that's going to automatically lower the class size ratio of what shows up, assuming everything is equal, and that's the percentages that show up to each school. Now, if we have classrooms that, let's say all 30 showed up, then we're going to have to be flexible and nimble there and move them to multi-purpose spaces and those types of things. But the 6-foot rule will be in effect. And we're doing space audits right now to know what we have and don't have on our campuses.
Kathy, a question was asked of Lodi Unified. You're providing options for students and parents who don't feel comfortable returning, but what about your teachers and staff? Are there ways that you can place them in positions if they are concerned about returning to a classroom?
We have not finalized the procedures yet in terms of how teachers will be selected for the distance learning. So once that gets in place, that could be an option for teachers. We also, if there are places in independent study or other programs, that could be an option for teachers. But that we haven't finalized how that's going to work yet for our distance learning.
Question was asked, how will preschool classrooms look? Preschool students learn through social and emotional learning. A big part of preschool is hands-on learning. Brian, you have a lot of preschools in Stockton Unified. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, we do. And Deborah Keller, our director of preschools, I would defer to her. She's not on the line, but we are going to have to, that's going to have to look differently as well. And we have also kicked around potential ideas on particular subgroups, preschool or even K-3, because as you know, Mike, reading is so very important by that 3rd grade level. And do we allow those self-contained classrooms to be in school all 5 days, or do we put them in a hybrid as well? So we're having to make different decisions based on subgroups and our data. But yes, what they do in preschool prior to COVID is going to have to change with COVID.
Question was asked, will schools be providing water for students, or will they all be sharing out of the same drinking fountains?
We are going to provide water. We have some of our school sites who have water filling stations where students can fill their own bottle, but we are going to be providing water and probably closing off communal drinking fountains.
What happens if a student accidentally drops or gets his or her face mask dirty? Will a new one be given each time, or is there enough of a supply for that if it happens frequently?
We decide that's something students need, we'll continue to provide them, provided we can get our hands on them. And I anticipate that we will also be doing a lot of training with students and staff at the very beginning of the year on all of those procedures. How to do healthy hygiene, how to take care of your mask. We're going to be doing that with families as well. Just like we taught them to use a Chromebook, same sorts of things.
I appreciate all the questions. I'm trying to keep up with them, and sometimes I'm combining them just so that we can touch on as many issues as possible. One of the kind of threads had to do with classroom setup. Teachers a lot of times will very creatively set up their classroom, but are they going to have to be kind of stripped to the bare bones in order to meet the distancing guidelines? What is the approach going to be done? Are you going to be probably taking out a lot of furniture that maybe is a luxury at this point, or what's the approach that's going to happen there?
Yeah, that's part of our space audit, Mike. We're looking at what we can take out, file cabinets, just things that are just in the way. And that's going to have to be addressed, assuming we come back day one, depending on how many students come into a classroom, we're going to have to make accommodations right there live. And with all our new, I mean, you know as well as I do, Stockton Unified has a bunch of new buildings. And unfortunately, a lot of our new furniture is a lot of collaborative furniture that is connected together and encouraging student interaction and teacher interaction. And we have to find ways to kind of break that apart a little bit and make that look differently too. So it's a good and a bad problem to have. We got new furniture, but it's not furniture that's COVID friendly. So we have to make those decisions, and we're currently working on it, but it may look different day one if a bunch of kids show up to a site that we didn't anticipate that many would show up, and then we go from there.
There's one question that a parent asked 3 or 4 things specifically about their student. I'll cut it down to the one at the top. My child, this is Lodi Unified, my child is in the GATE program. If I choose to do the distance learning model, will a GATE certified teacher be available for this model?
I don't know at this point because we have not selected teachers for that program, so I cannot guarantee that it would be a GATE certified teacher, but if that is something that we can offer, we absolutely would. Other teachers would be qualified and able to differentiate instruction for GATE students as they do for other learners, students who need support. So there could be other ways that students could get those services in a distance learning mode, even if it isn't a GATE certified teacher. We also have GATE coach that could assist the teacher in any way at that point, and other instructional coaches. So we would absolutely do our very best to make sure that the child's needs are met.
Thank you. Question that was asked of Lincoln Unified. Summer is going to be over soon. I hope Lincoln Unified has been planning for online teaching. We'll be ready to implement in August. Please send an update to parents so we have an idea of what the district is thinking about. Kelly, do you have a date set that when you might be making those plans?
Yeah, we have a board meeting on the 8th of July. I anticipate taking a plan to the board at that time.
Okay. If we do distance learning and students are not signing in, will there be a welfare check on the children? City of Stockton has had a child that, anyway, are there going to be welfare checks done on students from distance learning?
Mike, this is something that has been very important to us at the County Office of Education. As you know, we educate students with some significant challenges in their lives. So this is something that's very critical, is their safety. And so we continue to conduct welfare checks at the home, even after we physically close school campuses. Something that's also troubling is that reports of child abuse to CPS have gone down significantly during school shutdown, which doesn't mean that incidents of abuse have stopped. It just means that the frontline reporters, teachers, and school staff are not there to protect children. And so this is very, it's a real critical issue for us as a community, and how to ensure that we're keeping students safe as we perhaps continue with distance learning in some form. Just one other thing I'd like just kind of share is, because there are a number of questions about masks and for students. The governor came out, it's been a week or so, mandating the wearing of masks in California in public places and venues. And there was some confusion around that application of masks to schools and students. So CDPH is, I just heard this morning, they should be coming out any day now with revised guidance on the use of masks in schools for both staff and students, because their current guidance, which our county guidelines reflect, are optional, both they're recommended for staff and also recommended for students, but they're not mandated in the current guideline. So CDPH should be coming out any day now with updated guidelines around masks for both students and staff.
I really appreciate the superintendent's given us about an hour and a half of their time, and we're still almost at 300 people on here. It's obviously one of those things where we could probably ask and answer questions all night, and I appreciate your time. We are going to go through all of the questions that were asked and try to pull all the Lodi questions together, the Stockton Unified questions, and then we'll send them to the superintendents, because I know we didn't get to even close to getting to all of them. But I do need to close up. But before we do that, I just kind of wanted to give each of the superintendents a chance to give kind of a closing statement about whatever, whether it's getting through what you just got through, heading into next year, just your thoughts on doing that. And Kathy, do you want to start?
Sure, and I'm not sure how much of my very first answer got on when I lost connection, but I just want to say that our board is very much taking this seriously and very much concerned about students and staff, and they did give direction at the last meeting to open with a full schedule on August 3rd with an interest in looking at calendar issues. But they also acknowledge that this is a changing situation and that they're going to have to monitor this very carefully. And we are actually making plans for all different types of scenarios, and knowing that we could be thrown in a different scenario at any given time. So the key is flexibility here, that our board acknowledges that we could be starting in a full schedule and maybe we're not. But we will have to keep our parents and staff informed. And I know that that's uncomfortable and frustrating because folks want definite answers right away. Unfortunately, in this type of environment, we just simply can't do that. So just stay tuned. We'll keep communicating as best we can as we move through this to get to the start of the year. We have real good folks in place. Our teachers have been doing a fantastic job. Our principals at the school site are working hard to make plans. So we will make sure that we do the best we can for our community.
Thanks so much for being with us, Kathy.
Sure.
Kelly?
I would echo much of Kathy's sentiments. We are grateful for the great work and flexibility of all of the employees in the district, and certainly the support of our Board of Trustees. This has been a challenging situation, but it's brought out the best in many circumstances. We've learned a lot about ourselves and our ability to shift gears and get things in place for the benefit of our students and families. And I would also say that all of the input that we've received has been highly beneficial. I'm grateful to the people who've taken a few moments to reach out, ask questions, and share their thoughts and concerns with us. It's really going to be vital as we move forward and prepare to return to school. Thank you for the opportunity to participate today.
Thank you so much. Brian?
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. I'm very appreciative to Jamie and the county office for all the work that they've done and really guided our work for our district. I was very fortunate that I have a very engaged and active board. I appreciate them so much. They all care about kids. I had 2 of them today for 5 hours, really taking a deep dive into what this looks like. And we're going to have a lot of conversation on Wednesday as well. I'm very appreciative to a staff that is willing to innovate and think outside of the box and try to create a new normal, not just going back to what we used to do, but really addressing some of the equity concerns that we had. And there's no time like this to have your first superintendent gig, right? It's been very interesting, very challenging, but very good work. A lot of people could look at this and go, "Oh my God, this is a time of stress and panic," but it's kind of exciting because you really get to address the system and really try to do things that are good for kids. And Stockton Unified, and you've heard me say this a lot of time, Mike, we have such amazing kids that I just want to make sure that we give them everything we can for them to be successful. And I'm glad that I have a staff devoted to doing that. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. James, I guess you get the benediction.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Mike, thank you for putting this together, and thanks to UOP and Beyond Our Gates. Really excellent discussion. What I've really enjoyed, I've been trying to read many of the comments in the chat bar, and we're going to download and save those. The questions being asked are these are the questions that we are struggling with and trying to answer. They're excellent questions. This is very, as I mentioned at the outset, we're in uncharted territory here, right? And we are trying to make decisions in the best interest of our students, of our staff, of our community. And it's challenging for sure, but I do know this. I know we're all working together. We are listening. We're trying to come up with solutions that best serve our students and community. And yeah, that's why I think this forum was so important. So thanks so much, and thank you to everyone for joining today, really.
Thanks, Jamie. I did want to touch on a few Beyond Our Gates, kind of housekeeping things, if you give me just a couple more minutes. For the last 5 years in a row, we've done a Everyday Counts attendance challenge, and last year it was just super. We had 151 schools entered in it, and we had 43,000 students with perfect attendance. We're going to suspend it for a year. This is not the right year to be looking at perfect attendance in September. We're going to try to do some things and spend some of our Irvine Foundation grant money on attendance awareness things, but you know, a student and a family is probably being a better citizen if they keep their kid away from school when they're sick. So it really just didn't make a lot of sense to have a perfect attendance challenge this year. So hopefully next year, but we're going to put it on hold for a year. You know, each year we also do a literacy report card for the county. A lot of that is based on the standardized tests from the year before, which didn't exactly happen this year because of COVID. So that also is we're going to look at trying to do something different there as far as gauging assessment with the schools. And our mini grants, we've given out $250,000 in literacy mini grants the last few years. And the period for applying for those ends on July 7th, and we expect to have $60,000 or $70,000 to be able to give out this year. And then we will continue to try to convene things like this. Hopefully we can get back together in person. I'm not sure exactly, we're going to have our annual dialogue. I'm not sure what purpose. And we're also looking at putting together a K through 12 social justice conversation similar to this. So I just really appreciate all your time. And I know you're dealing with very difficult issues. And I appreciate all the parents and others who were on the chat today to deal with it. It means a lot. And above all, just everybody be safe as we try to deal through this. Thanks so much.